What's going on, guys? This is Cade Lamb, and you are listening to the Fear Not, Do Right podcast. I'm joined today with an incredible guest, and I'm really excited we were able to make this happen on such short notice. I'm joined today by Mike Glover. Mike, you're pretty well known these days.
Yeah, I guess so. I think so. I don't like that, but yeah.
Well, I mean, you kind of got a secret squirrel pass that is.
Yeah. I'm one of the few guys that I think in the agency that have come out and, talked about my experiences and for a period of time talked about military experiences for a long while. But yeah, thanks for having me. It's cool. I talked to your dad, Sheriff Mark Lamb, and he said, one, fear not, do right. Awesome saying, awesome logo, awesome branding, but also awesome. Yeah, like morally and ethically. I think when at the end of the day, when you think about all the things that we go through, you can't go wrong with fear not and doing right. And I learned that from Mark Lamb a long time ago, and I think it's real cool that you're doing this.
Well, we started it probably around the same time Fieldcraft really started taking off. I had just gotten home from my mission. I had just enlisted, and we're like, dude, we got this saying. We got this is one of our core beliefs. Let's get an LLC for it and start slapping it on a T-shirt. And about a year ago, I started doing the podcast with it under the same name because there were so many problems. And I know you've seen these problems because you talk about it all the time on social media with Fieldcraft, American Contingency, just all these different things where everyone likes to talk about problems, but no one likes to talk about solutions.
Very true. Yeah,
and
very true.
They echo chamber these problems. I was actually with a couple mutual friends that we have. One was at a Turning Point event and another at a Heritage Foundation. And man, you just listen to these pundits and talking heads and politicians talk about what China's doing and foreign policy and all this stuff, and none of it means anything. And then you got goobers who've never been in a fist fight saying, well, we should go fight these guys and that. And
yeah, there's a lot of virtue signaling going on, and I get it. It's people. I mean, people historically, obviously, are erred in their thinking. We're not perfect, and I think you're right. Something is very off in society now, where that seems to be our only focus is problems, instead of talking about potential solutions, or even just staying positive. I mean, your dad was talking to me about it today for my podcast, the Mike Force podcast, and he's like, you can't tackle darkness with more darkness. You can only tackle it with light, and that's very true. So I appreciate the meaning behind it, and at the end of the day, you can't go wrong by doing that.
yeah. Well, you've had a lot of opportunity, I feel. I mean, because I've obviously followed you for quite a while between Fieldcraft and the other projects that you've had, and you've become a mentor to a lot of guys from the community that we both share, being over at Fort Bragg and all that stuff. And so, like I said, you've had ample opportunity, it seems like, to be tested in how you fear not, how you do right, especially as you kind of go further in your career now as a entrepreneur, as a businessman.
Yeah, it's definitely a test and a journey, and I've learned a lot of hard lessons, but I've learned and I've adapted, and everything from toxic people on social media to being called out by the FBI, all these different things that are very bizarre. But my general rule of thumb is don't focus on negative and keep doing what you're doing. And I think that resonates. And I think people at some point, maybe the peak of this, were very bought into the idea of being toxic and being divisive and doing all these bad things. But now people are exhausted from it. And I think we're at a turning point where now people realize how much that affects your mental health and your abilities to be successful. When you're sitting in an echo chamber circling the drain, you're not advancing, you're not evolving. And more importantly than business, more importantly than popularity, being a dad has brought me closer to that mission of just being focused on positivity and realizing that, I talked with Mark Lamb about his son, your brother, and how difficult that was. Like, time on this planet is too short to be bogged down with all these nuances that don't matter. And instead, you should focus on the things that you can control. And remember, your life and everything that you think is important could be gone in a flash. And so that should reset your hierarchy of needs and your priorities. And it certainly has for me. Losing friends in war has done that for me. Losing friends outside of war and suicide or accidents or whatever. Now I'm playing the long game. And it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, where did all of that start from? For those who don't know who Mike Glover is, right? Because there's a surprisingly large number of middle-aged women who listen to this podcast. So who is Mike Glover? Where did your sort of journey on that start?
Yeah, so I'm just I'm a product of the Korean War. I mean, the Korean War is from 50 to 53. I'm not that old, but the Korean War started an occupation in Korea. My dad, who was in the Army in the 80s, the 70s and the 80s, met my mom, who was in Korea, Korean citizen, South Korean citizen. Our family was torn apart in Korea on the Korean side during that campaign. Just a brief moment of history. I mean, if it wasn't for America intervening, we'd be owned by the Japanese. We'd be owned by the Chinese or the Russians, because everybody was buying in for the occupation of that real estate. So we fought this war until we, drew a line in the sand, essentially, at the demilitarized zone. We never even signed a peace agreement. We signed an armistice agreement. And so my dad, who was in the Army serving, his brother was in the Navy serving, post-Vietnam as their experience, because they graduated high school right after Vietnam was over with. They served. I was brought into this world, and my dad was a law enforcement officer, and my mom was a beautician. I grew up very blue collar. I tell people I grew up in poverty, but back in those days, it's all I knew. It didn't define who I was. I mean, I didn't wake up going, I feel poor. I woke up feeling happy because I didn't have a lot of material things. It doesn't mean I wasn't blessed with a lot of opportunity. And my dad was a hardworking guy. My mom was a hardworking woman. They were separated. And so I split the time between Daytona Beach, Florida, where my dad was living at the time, and North Carolina. So I have, I'm a surfer kid who's got a country accent, and I got the best of both worlds. My family on both sides were very large. So my cousins and all my aunts and all my uncles were very closely connected. So I grew up with family being a thing, and a lot of people aren't, now especially growing up in family units where that's a thing. They don't know what family dinners are. They don't know what traditions are. Everybody gets together on Thanksgiving and Christmas, and you have all these traditions. I grew up that way. Joined the Army at 17, pre-Global War on Terror, pre-9/11, and had a good run. Went to all the schools, Airborne Ranger, all that stuff. Even guarded the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier early on. And then 9/11 happened. And I think if you're on the planet Earth and were developed enough to remember, it changed your life in some way. Or you knew somebody was affected, and it was just a September 12th mindset, which is what I had. I talk about September 10th mindsets being complacent. I think we're there now, but we are very closely connected as Americans on September 12th. And then fast forward, basically from 9/11 all the way until I got out of the Army in 2016, I spent my entire career deploying in the Global War on Terror, deployed 9 times the war, and then at some point hung it up the full-time position. I actually was a master sergeant at the time, transitioned into, after my team sergeant time, which means I ran a team of snipers, free fall qualified snipers. I transitioned into the reserve component and became a sergeant major in 19th Group in Texas, and then was working for the CIA full-time. so between deployments, I mean, I would literally fly to Yemen with the CIA, do a rotation, fly back, put on a uniform, and then fly to Africa and do counterterrorism operations and against Boko Haram in Niger, Africa.
Sounds like a good time.
It was a great time. It was a great time. Being in the global war on terror was a great time for me because that's all I ever wanted. And then separating from the military and then working for the CIA full time is the evolution of that process. At some point, I decided, hey, man, I don't know what it was. It was a series of a multitude of events that I was like, man, I'm just done with this. I separated and basically said I'm giving up the CIA and started Fieldcraft Survival Company. And the incentive for me was I grew up in business. I understood business, but I didn't want to work for anybody anymore. I felt like I had earned it. A lot of people, especially young men like you and your peers, have this mechanism in you, which I think is proper, of selflessly serving something because you want to earn it. And I felt at that time in my career I had earned it. And so I started Fieldcraft, and that was about 8 years ago. And here we are 8 years later, and I'm here in front of you working as a CEO of Fieldcraft and doing a whole bunch of things in the field of survival and preparedness.
So when you started Fieldcraft, what was the original design that you guys were shooting for?
Yeah, it's a good question. I didn't know at the time. I mean, what I did know is I didn't want to be like everybody else. At the time, Travis Haley, Costa, Kyle Lamb, all these popular tactical instructors with military backgrounds were out in the world doing what they did. And so I didn't want to be that necessarily because I didn't think I was good enough. I mean, I didn't think I had enough tactical expertise. I had a lot of tactical experience, but those guys were doing it. And survival, most people think about like the primitive survival aspect of it, bushcraft. But for me, survival was different because I have been to every survival school the military had to offer. I think technically in special operations, I've been to every survival school, official cover course, peacetime detention, covert communications, high-risk SEER. I even went to the CIA's premier survival course. And I really liked it because it was very relevant for me working in semi-permissive environments. And I felt like that was relatable to people who were civilians. And so I came up with the idea of starting a modern survival company. And I called it Fieldcraft Survival. Fieldcraft coming from my lineage as a sniper. I mean, that's what I did in the military. I was a designated sniper, and that was my job in special operations. And then I thought, man, survival is not a specific thing. It's not technical. It is a lifestyle. It's a culture. And so for that, it meant I was going to be interested, and I wasn't going to be pigeonholed in one field. I was going to be able to do mobility, to do homesteading, which I wasn't into, but I really liked it, to do bushcraft, to do mindset, resilience, all those things. And so I decided that was the genre. It took me 7 years to figure it out, and I feel like finally, maybe 2 or 3 years, the last 2 or 3 years, I really got a grasp and hold, and we're truly pioneering the space of survival and preparedness. I see more companies populating now, and I go, oh, that's a good sign.
So let's back up a little bit. What is, for those who don't know, how would you define a permissive, semi-permissive, or non-permissive environment? What are you talking about there? Because there's a lot of that to be found, and people may not know that they may be in one of those situations. Yeah,
so a non-permissive versus permissive versus semi-permissive has to do with environmental factors. A non-permissive environment is typically a hostile environment, and we use the terminology to associate what's called a CT environment versus a counterintelligence environment. A CT environment is likely a war zone. A counterintelligence environment is likely a foreign service or foreign adversary going after you in some way, trying to collect intel, might be targeting you, might even be hostile. So when we go into different environments, we assess the environment or the atmosphere, top down, left and right, 360 degrees, on our survival and how we reduce risk to ourselves. So when I say non-permissive, it means hostile. When I say permissive, it means completely capable and able to move about freely. And then when I say semi-permissive, I'm meaning Pakistan. Pakistan is like a semi-permissive environment. Everything's cool until it's not. And the cool association from a military perspective, because I use that military terminology because that's how I plan operations, do counterterrorism, all the mission sets. When I looked at it from a business perspective and relating that to civilians live in a semi-permissive environment. Pinal County is a semi-permissive environment. Everything's cool until it's not. And when it's not, most people aren't prepared to manage permissive to non-permissive and operate in that spectrum. So they're rolling down the street. A guy gets out of a car and starts an active shooting. Well, most civilians don't know the start point in that. Like, what do I do? What is the situation? How do I break contact? What are the skills? What are the technical skill sets? What's the mindset? All those things. So in explaining that, I realized I had a lot of adapted training, conditioning from the military that was constantly preparing me for the worst case scenario. And when I became a civilian, I realized there is no training whatsoever to prevent civilians from becoming casualties of catastrophes at all. Not even natural disasters. I mean, if you're reading a booklet on how to survive a natural disaster while a natural disaster is ripping your house apart, that's a bad protocol. So preemptively, I wanted to create the culture, all of the things to make sure that civilians, without the group think, without the culture, without the institution, could think on their own, have the tools necessary, and survive any level of those environments.
I think people really overlook how simple a lot of those situations can break down to. Like, I mean, you even look at some of these cases where there's just a bad wreck on a highway in a very inconvenient part of a remote area, and all of a sudden you went from being 45 minutes away from the nearest gas station to being 15 miles away from the nearest source of water. And that's something that nobody's ever nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks, oh, do I have enough water in my car? They have water 15 feet from them. And
I can name 5 major catastrophes, including a few weeks ago in Maui, in Lahaina, where this lack of both government institutional thinking and cultural thinking led to complacency, where people were killed, where people lost their lives, in many cases unnecessarily. It's a systemic problem in our culture because we haven't made. I mean, America is the freest, most capable country in the world, but because of that, one of the benefits of freedom is the ability to have that free will, the options, the choices. And by proxy, you're going to be complacent because a direct symptom of freedom is complacency. It's so comfortable, it's so good, we're not paying attention. And when that happens, people get killed, people get hurt.
What do you guys teach over at Fieldcraft to be the opposite of complacency?
Yeah, good question. So, complacency is bred into people via their routines and habits. I mean, it's a pattern of life issue. If you wake up every single morning and you have it made and you're very comfortable, you wake up I call it the comfort crisis. I mean, just quoting a book. You wake up in a climate-controlled environment. You walk 10 feet from the climate-controlled environment into a box on wheels that's climate-controlled. How much discomfort in your life exists? Likely none. I mean, you've literally pushed out, and for the sake of optimization, you've pushed out all the discomfort because you want to live an optimized life. And in doing so, because you're trying to buy back your time, become more efficient, you use that time to do more complacent things. Like, nobody goes and does hardship. They go on vacation, right? You have it really easy, but you want to get it so easy that you plan a vacation to have it even easier, right? And that's just a natural pattern of life, natural routine. So if you want to build resilience, which is the opposite of complacency, you have to deliberately and intentionally put yourself in difficult exposures, both in time and difficulty and scale of veracity, to be able to continually assess and test your will, which will build your resilience. In the military, we did that because it was part of the gates of the assessments and the tests that we did as a tribe. You go to basic training, you go to advanced individual training, you come out together, you put on the blue cord. You're part of a tribe that you went through hardship together. Where does that exist in our culture today? It doesn't. I mean, you talk about your mission. In LDS, you go on a mission. It's a hardship. Why? Because it's a sacrifice. Why? Because it's making you better. That's why.
You know, it's always interesting. So when I was in high school, I used to do like boxing and MMA, jiu-jitsu, all that stuff. And I always found that when I was always training and I was always in the gym and getting punched in the face all the time and getting choked out and being put into extremely uncomfortable situations by people bigger, faster, stronger than me, I'd see something on the street, you know, like a car crash or a street fight or something. And most people in that circumstance, they see that and they have an immediate adrenaline spike. They see that and they're like, oh, what, what do I do? What do I do? Those guys are fighting. What do I do? And they're freaking out over something they're not even involved with. But what I found when I was fighting and I was in the ring, I was in the box, I'd see that situation or, you know, some sort of stress-inducing scenario would happen, and I was cool as can be. I was like, oh, okay, that's crazy, bro. That's crazy. Not my problem, or not even if it's not my problem. I know what my solution in this problem is.
Yeah, you were exposing yourself to micro disasters and catastrophes, which is making you more comfortable in operating in chaos. I mean, I'm very comfortable in chaos, and it's because I've been there before, and I've been conditioned for it. I'm not special. I tell people, like, yeah, I was special forces. But what makes me special is I volunteered again and again and again. When I failed, I got back up and I tried it again. And I volunteered for a lot of stuff. So I was exposed to a lot of different catastrophes, micro catastrophes. And that made me able to operate and proof myself in combat. And so when you go through those difficult circumstances, a civilian might be sitting back listening to this and going, well, I'm not an operator. I'm not a special operations person. I'm not a military person. I'm not a police officer. I'm not a first responder. You don't have to be any of those things. If you have the ability to volunteer for something that makes you uncomfortable, I tell people, like, if your wife likes ballet and you're not into it, well, why are you not into it? You're not into it because it makes you uncomfortable, because you're like, yeah, this is stupid. Well, why do you think it's stupid? Why don't you just give it an effort? Give it a try. Like, look at the history of ballet. By the way, I'm not a ballet practitioner, nor do I condone ballet. But it's a great example because I know nothing about it. But if you studied it and if you were interested in what your family or your spouse was interested in, because she's interested in it, you might find there's a little gem in there. Or you might walk out of the ballet and be like, that was crap. But now you know. But you worked yourself through something. It's the same thing that a workout of the day does. You know, you don't have to be an operator. You don't have to go to selection. You don't have to go to Ranger School. You go do the workout of the day. And the reason you do the workout of the day is because it's prescribed. And if you take the medicine and you do what you're told to do, likely at some point you're going to hit a wall. And when you hit that wall, you push past that wall, it's going to build you better, stronger, faster, and more mentally resilient. I mean, it's how a single cell organism grows in adaptation. When it's disrupted, when it's probed, when it's shaken, when it's disrupted, it adapts to that disruption and becomes better, stronger, more resilient. And so you're a grown-up full of cells. You need to be willing to do that, because the first step in intention, meaning like you're volunteering for that, is going to be what makes you better. And I hate to say it, but it's so damn easy. And I have to do it now because I'm so comfortable. You know, I'm financially secure, got a successful company, everything's going my way. I have to purposely put myself in uncomfortable situations to intentionally make myself more resilient, or I'll just grow more complacent. And that would be the opposite of what I'm trying to do.
Well, a lot of it breaks down to, I always say that I'm going to find a way to win, even if it's a no-win situation. You know, as you very well know, you go to a lot of these field training events, these selections, these courses, and you are purposely intended to fail. No matter how perfectly you may perform, you're intended to fail. But that's so that you can develop okay, I'm going to win. Like, I'm going to find every effort. I'm going to make every effort. I'm going to, you know, maybe not cheat, but I'm going to take every liberty that I can to be successful. You know, many of the courses that, you know, you've been to, it's like most of the time it's so hands off. It's just accomplish task. How do you accomplish the task? Doesn't matter. How do you make yourself, and being so unsupervised, I think makes people not just uncomfortable, but terrified, where it's like, oh, wait, I have to actually think through this problem. I can't just be told what to do and how to do it, because that's a comfort all on its own, where instead of, you know, going to the gym and getting after it and pushing yourself in an environment that you're not used to, it's easier to just go do, you know, bench or the CrossFit on the board, or, you know, whatever it is that Jenny Craig has put out for her diet, versus, hey, I'm going to actually take some inventory and figure out what I need to be successful of my own metric, rather than just following, instead of just existing in, you know, even though it may be the hyper masculine, like go to the gym, carry the boats, all that stuff. Well, if you're comfortable there, where do you get uncomfortable?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it has to do with human conditioning. Right? If you're a human being, the natural propensity is to slide through life. Right? You want it easy because that means you're being more efficient. It's like the idea that being alone, you know, the show, that's the survival show where you're alone. Most bushcraft experts think they're going to thrive in that environment because they have the technical skills. And then they realize, whoa, this is different. It's different because the factors are different. You're now alone by yourself, and the lone wolf won't survive, right? It takes a tribe. It takes relying and relaying a community to be able to accomplish these sometimes complex tasks in survival. Discipline and integrity come to mind because most people don't have discipline and integrity, and so they just skate by. They just slide by, and they don't want to be vulnerable. I mean, how many people wake up every single day and say, I'm ready to expose my weaknesses to the world? They don't want to do that. But the amount of growth and evolution as human beings that we see in those vulnerable moments, you have to be willing to fail. And most people aren't, because they don't like the way it feels. And so weakness breeds weakness. And when you surround yourself with resilient, influential, positive people that are willing to push you and push themselves, you'll grow. Or you don't, and you remain stagnant, and you have regret. And you look back at your life and you go, I wish I would have. And you'll never believe how many people hit me up every single day and go, I wish I would have. Most men in their 40s, because that's when they start figuring it out, and now there's no takebacks. It's like, you're going to live with that regret if you don't square yourself away. So if you know 10 years from now you're going to be that guy, start changing and turn around things right now. And most people won't, because they don't want to be exposed to some identified weakness. The biggest strength we have is we have the ability to listen to these kind of inputs. You have access to the internet that I didn't have access to as a child or as a young man. I didn't get intel for joining the military. I just did it. I didn't get intel on special operations. I just did it. And there's something to that. But with the access to the information, with the right mindset, you can crush it. I mean, you could do whatever you want to put your mind to. You go in the military, you have a run. Okay. You get out of the military, you want to start a business, you want to be successful, you could do that. You just need to be willing to have the discipline and integrity, which is the discipline to wake up and get it done every single day, and the integrity to do that again and again when nobody's watching, when nobody's virtue signaling about it online. It's the people in the shadows that are crushing it every single day. People go, Mike, I want to be like you. I'm like, well, what I want you to do is I want you to go live a career, 20 years in special operations in the CIA. And then I want you to teach for a decade. And then I want you to go through hardships like I've gone through hardships. And maybe if the stars align, you'll be where I'm at. Or you could live your own journey, but be willing to commit to the time, because this isn't for me and for every single person that I've been around. Cameron Haynes, the Jocko Willens of the world, Andy Stumps of the world, the Joe Rogans of the world. No single person that I've seen successful has magically become successful. They just had more discipline, more integrity over time, which is a good recipe for success.
One of the things that you touched on, and then you kind of named off a few guys, is that tribe aspect. When you think about those, it's funny how those disciplined individuals have kind of created this. They may not be sitting on the couch, podcasting together every single day, but there is that tribe that has kind of come together through those principles of discipline and integrity. If you are a guy who's, early 20s, out of high school, out of the military, just getting after it, or if you're just a person who is looking for that tribe, where would you go to look for it?
That's a good question. 5 of your closest allies in your life are going to define who you are. It's a collective. It's a culmination. I mean, you're the sum of those 5 people. Their personality, their influences, their character. It could be your dad. It could be your close friends. If those people are the right people collectively, when you guys come together because you're being positive, because you're looking at the next thing, you're going to the gym together, you're going to shoot competitions, you're doing whatever that is, you are one-upping each other in competition. It's the warriors of the tribe leading each other. If your sum of 5, the 5 people closest connected to you, aren't the best people in the world, they're going to drag you down. And I've lived that, which is what mostly as advice that I give to young men and women, especially women. You surround yourself with the wrong toxic people, that's who you're going to be a sum of. And that is going to mentally and physically affect the rest of your lives forever. My best advice would be trim the fat. Take the people that aren't the most positive and uplift them if you can. And if you can't, cut sling load, meaning get away from them and move past those people, because you're evolving. And when I did that as a deliberate tactic as a human being, I have greatly increased my net worth, not in a monetary value, even though monetarily I've increased my net worth, but as a person, as a value, as a father, as the things that I find more important than material or monetary value, I've leveled up. The closest guys to me, Andy Stump, Evan Hafer, Andy Frisella, these people are my best friends. And when you look at them across the board, I can call them or text them right now and they would do anything for me, just as I would for them. But if you look at their success and then the people they are, that's unmatched. And if you're a young man looking for that, you don't find a guy like me and try to befriend me. Like Andy says, the friend application for my peer group is closed. I mean, I'm just tethered to that. You need to collectively find your tribe and build those men and women around you and create your own community and your own tribe. I mean, it's like building an organization from the ground up. It's like It's like Charlie Beckwith building Delta Force from day one. It's a really awesome opportunity for you to succeed. And when you bring those people together, you'll be lifelong friends. You'll advance together. You'll network together, and you'll thrive together.
I think that with any of those relationships, from being where it's a special operations perspective, or even just like a tier 1 business perspective, those people don't come without some level of sacrifice, as aforementioned. There's like, if you want anything, you have to work for it. And if you want to qualify as one of those people, or for someone else like that, if you see another person that's like getting after it and doing the right things and doing the hard things, it takes that, again, discipline and integrity that qualifies you for those relationships. It's doing the little things right every time.
Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers makes a great case that nobody is gifted on the planet Earth. Nobody wakes up and is the billionaire, the millionaire, the successful entrepreneur, athlete, or musician. What they do is, just as I did, is I worked in a craft and I made that my passion, and I did that for a decade. He quotes 10,000 hours. That's a decade. Most people confuse that, especially shooters, with reps. No. 10,000 hours is 10 years. It's a decade of committed time. I mean, he's pretty old, so he talks about Bill Gates and he talks about the Beatles. But if you look at anybody, including my own career and perspective, I was just figuring things out post-military as an experience. When I went to CIA and I started training and doing instruction, I'm 10 years into teaching people, and I'm just figuring it out. I'm like a master trainer now. And in the military, as an 18 Bravo, even as an 11 Bravo team leader in the infantry, I was considered a master trainer, and I knew nothing, right? Take 20-year-old Sergeant Glover, Airborne Ranger qualified, with an expert infantry badge, and fast forward to Mike Glover, the entrepreneur, to that, who is that guy? And so you're going to evolve over time. And as long as the people around you are evolving with you because they're willing to thrive and be the best versions of themselves, and you're going to have to uplift each other when times are down, it's because it's not all glitz and glamour, then you're on the right track. And I think that's, like, I remember growing up with guys, and I also remember outgrowing men around me. And guys, when I went to Ranger School as a private, they're like, "You're going to Ranger School?" I'm like, "Yeah." And I remember, I tell this story often. I would be in the barracks, and I was 17, 18 years old. And I was putting on a rucksack and loading out my ruck on a Friday night. And there's guys, probably Bud Lights, shotgunning Bud Lights in the barracks. And that wasn't me, because I wanted to be something different. And I knew if I followed the herd, then I would end up like all the other guys that I heard of, the DUI, the guy who wasn't put out enough effort, end up in jail, whatever it was. I just didn't want anything to do with it. So I remember one night, Friday night, Fort Myer, Virginia, I had a ruck on. I was in Army PTs. I mean, that's how much of a nerd I was. I didn't even put on civilian clothes, which is weird. Not many options for PTs back then, physical training uniforms. So I put on like Ranger panties and a T-shirt, and I put on my ruck Friday probably at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. And I walked by them, and all of them were like in club clothes. They had their cologne on, their hair gelled back, and they were shotgunning beers. And when I walked through them, many of them judged me. And I always wondered about that. Like, why would a man who joined the Army, who knew what this journey was going to be about, judge me? And as I went through them, not one of them wanted to go with me, because they're like, "I'm going to the club. I mean, I know my priorities." But I remember distinctly some of those men looking at me and wanting to be like me. Even guys years later. I mean, I had a guy who became an E8, a first sergeant, when I was a sergeant major, and he came and found me, and he said, "I never wanted to tell you this, but when I saw you doing that, it made me realize that I wanted to be like that, and I just didn't have the personal courage to do it." And so I stood alone. And so often you're going to have to stand alone if you want to succeed. And sometimes that's going to be your own personal journey. So the sum of five doesn't define you. It could complement you. But sometimes, like many times in hardships in my life, I dug deep and I was the guy who was doing it alone. It wasn't for Instagram. It wasn't for the analytics. It wasn't for the revenue. It was because that's who I was at my core. I was the guy rucking at 12 o'clock at midnight, or working all day and then coming home, putting on the ruck, and then doing it again. And fast forward and looking at all those habits, looking back, the reason I am where I'm at today are because of those defining moments that started at a very young age that I continued to do when everybody else wanted to shotgun beers in the hallway. And so as a CEO, even as a father, there's a lot of times that I don't want to get up and I don't want to do the thing. But I still remember, like it was yesterday, walking down that hall, and I will not let those people bring me down and define me, no matter what it is. And I'm still reliving that moment because I want to be better. I want to be a better father. I want to be a better entrepreneur. I want to be a better person. And no judgment to anybody who's shotgunning beers. Do you, man. I did me. You do you.
So here's my next question off of that, because I think this is the next evolution. Because there's a lot of things to look for, and there's a lot of things that are easily identified as a liability to have around you. But when you as you've gone through Ranger School, selection, every day being a selection over in group, what were the things that you were seeing? Because obviously there's a lot of physical top performers. There can be a lot of people who are in one way or another, in one practice or another, getting after it, but they can still be that toxic team member, that guy who doesn't need to be on an op with us, who doesn't need to be training with us, who doesn't need to be here or in that top five. What are some of the red flags, if you will, for that tribe? If you're looking for tribe members, what are some red flags that aren't as easily identified that can still bring you down?
Yeah, they're really easy from a military experience. Alcohol, infidelity, substance abuse. All of those things were things that I saw that were very easy. Look, like I heard Hulk Hogan say this on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I grew up with Hulk Hogan. I really admire the guy. And I always wondered why Hulk Hogan, who's now 70, he's going to be 70 soon, why he survived when hundreds of wrestlers died. They died of heart disease and steroid abuse, substance abuse, suicide, all these things. And it's like a rock and roller, right? Why do some rock and rollers survive the long haul and most die by the wayside? And it comes down to a few things. I don't have an addictive personality. And Hulk Hogan said on the podcast, on Rogan's podcast, I don't have addictive personality. And when everybody else was enthralled with the booze, the women, all the things, it wasn't difficult for me to refocus my attention on things that mattered to me. And it was, for him, it was his, he, by no means was he perfect, just like I'm not saying that I was perfect. I've been on slippery slopes, but I always came back to the fundamentals, like God and physical fitness, health and wellness, and taking care of myself, take care of my family. And so when you're looking for peers that you need to surround yourself with, are they genuinely good people? And that's the first question I would ask, because I don't want to be surrounded by people who aren't good people. If I drive down the road and I see somebody in harm's way, I'm helping them. If I see a person in a wheelchair in a torrential downpour, I'm going to run out and give them my $200 multicam jacket. Why? Because it's a $200 jacket. I don't care about that. What I care about is people, right? So get people in your circle who care genuinely about people. A lot of Jordan Peterson will tell you 4% of the population of men in this country are genuine psychopaths. and I believe it. I've met them. I've had psychopaths work for me, and I've seen all the indications of them. I'm pretty academically schooled with a degree and also understand behavioral dynamics and know what that is. Know that most people are not, but there are signs and indication of narcissism and truly psychopaths. And they can't show empathy. They aren't humble. They are sociopaths and they are narcissistic, but they also are crazy. Rid yourself of all those people, because those people will not only bring you down, they will trick you and manipulate you into thinking that you potentially are the problem. And that's a real mental health dilemma. And it's only increasing, by the way. This is why I bring it up. Third, substance abuse in all of its forms is going to do nothing for you. I drink occasionally. I'll have a glass of wine with pairing with food or whatever. I'll have a beer with buddies, but I will not drink for any buzz or intoxication, because there's nothing good that comes on the other end of being wasted. Don't do it. It is a waste of your time. It's a waste of your life, and there's no reason to do it. I can count on one hand on two fingers the times that I've been completely intoxicated. And those more had to do with the environment, the operational environment I was in, than anything else. Fourth, I would say habits and routines make you. If you have friends that you're surrounded with who have bad habits and routines, you need to help them with their habits and routines, or help yourself, because these problems I'm talking about, you might be like, dude, I might be the sociopath. Help yourself by getting better. And I used to be the guy who, when I'd come into a room, I would peer pressure people. And I'll say this, like, this is weird to say, and I don't mean it egotistically, because there was nobody to impress. When I was in my 20s, my teens and 20s, I didn't eat any sugar, barely any carbohydrates. I mean, I ate carbohydrates for fuel. I didn't drink any alcohol, and I was disciplined. I was in peak performance because my job was performance and surviving, so that I could take care of the guys in the field. In war. And I was deploying every single year of my service after 9/11. I deployed to war. So the stakes were high. So if I saw somebody eating pizza, or somebody getting fat, or somebody not working out, that really bothered me. You need to surround yourself with those kind of guys, because if those guys push you, like I push a lot of my teammates, like, why were you pushing me? Because I wanted you to live. I couldn't look at your face and then look at your wife's face at a barbecue, knowing that you weren't doing everything possible to make sure that you're coming home. We're literally deploying to war. We're sitting at a barbecue, drinking beer and eating ribs. That's fine. But if you have bad habits and routines that aren't going to optimize your health and wellness and your capability on the battlefield, you'll die. And I can't live with that. So I was that guy. I made my entire troop, my entire team, all the guys I was with work out all the time, because I wanted them to be better. And I grew up with a family that way. And lastly, there's something to be said about faith. And I don't like shoving God down people's throats, but I grew up Christian, non-denominational. I was baptized as a kid. Grew up in the church and multiple variations of it. But I also am a theologist. I'm very studied in Islam and Hindu. My entire Korean family were Hindu before they came over. When I think, and Buddhist, and so when I think about faith, if somebody doesn't have something they believe that's bigger and more substantial than themselves, then they find an artificial synthetic God to take that place. It's human nature. And so if Trump's your God, if your favorite actor's your God, that's a problem. Restore and humble yourself by just digging in the weeds a little bit, and I think you'll be better repaired. Those are my top 5 that I just made up, by the way. I've never been asked that question.
Well, those are great top 5. Well, and when you don't do those things, there's usually somebody doing that for you. Like, I know I can speak for my dad, who you've spent a lot of time with. He does those things. He's pushing himself every single day to make it happen for himself, his family, his entire community, and his entire state now that he's running for Senate. When you don't do those things, what are you saying to the people who do those things for you? If the guy eating pizza and not making himself sharp before deployment, what is he saying? How does he feel about the effort that you're putting in? He doesn't give a shit. And that's just as disrespectful, if not more disrespectful, than, taking yourself out of the equation, or being able to at least look yourself and say, hey, look, I am not up to snuff right now. I'm not doing the things I'm supposed to be doing, and taking that personal accountability. It's okay if you want to be greasy and eat pizza and do all that stuff, because everybody likes to do it. It's good. Nobody would want to do it if it was bad, if it was that bad. But when you're letting that control your life, not just in the physical sense, but in, the lack of discipline, the lack of everything like that, everything you just said, you're throwing all the effort in the face of everybody who's in your circle, or you're in their circle, and they're supporting you, and they're getting after it, and they, know it or not, look up to you. Whether that's your kids, your community, your family, whoever. That's it. It's a disrespect to them.
Yeah. You have to. I talked to your dad about this today. Like, you either command respect or you demand respect. And if you command respect, you do it through your virtues, through your values, through your actions. And if you demand it, you do it through your mouth. Like, you demand it. You will respect me. You already lost it, man. And so I identified a lot of strengths, those 5 strengths. You don't have to be strong in all of those things, but you have to be personally accountable. And so the reason we become not personally accountable is because we're simply not paying attention. If you come home every single day and you eat a bag of chips off your stomach watching TV, and that's your habit, that's your routine, then it's very easy 10 years down the road to look down and not see your feet and then realize, like, what just happened? Well, what just happened is you built a routine of a bad habit that you weren't paying attention to. So if you have friends that are just paying attention, if you actually have the informal leadership or the leadership to bring people together and intentionally live life with intention and intentionally say, hey guys, are we doing the right thing together? Hey, are we building each other up the right way? Hey, we're sitting around and we're getting wasted. Is this really what we want to be doing? Why don't we wake up at 06 tomorrow, go for a run, go for a hike, go volunteer, go do something else for somebody else and live a selfless life instead of doing this, which seems selfish. And if those people, when you're holding them accountable, aren't willing to listen, they're not your friends. And, I see a lot of people fall into groupthink and peer pressure, which are natural psychological behaviors. But man, sometimes it's better to walk alone, right? And then build your own tribe starting at 0 to 1. I would rather do that. I've done it many times in resets. I've been very disappointed in people who worked for me, people that I really respected, who completely showed their ass, and that's okay. That's all right. They're not kin. They're not blood. You'll get over it, and you could build it back again, and that's okay. I have a good network that I've built of trusted and vetted human beings who I trust very much. But again, I'm not judging these people. If they want to succeed with me, they'll succeed. And the people that I surround myself at my age, at this time in my life, are the right people. They're the people whose focus is family, who do the right thing, always do the right thing. And that's important. That takes some time. I mean, trust me, up until this point in my life, it's been quite the conundrum. And so don't feel, if you're listening to this, don't feel like just because you don't have this, you're not doing right. It's a constant cyclic journey. There is no pinnacle. You don't stand on top of a pedestal or a platform and say, we made it. That never happens. It's all cyclic. You get to the top, you'll fall to the bottom. And then you get yourself back up and you do it again. That's the journey that this is. What we're saying, what I'm saying, be conscious of it. Fight, strive for perfection, and you'll be always doing the right thing if you're striving for it versus just settling for it.
Now, I know that you've started building your tribe through the American contingency. What how did that start? And I know there's been some pretty exciting exciting turns with it as well.
Yeah, it started via unfortunate civil and social issue that derived in Seattle, Washington. And the mayor of Seattle contacted the chief of police in Seattle and said, we're basically not going to enforce any laws. I mean, we're not going to do that. Unless it's a mass casualty event, we're not going to do it. And it was proven. Like it was hypothetical at the time because I heard that that's likely what happened. But since then, when the chief of police resigned, all that came out, including the email evidence that it happened. And she said, we will not enforce any laws. And unless it's a mass casualty. And while she did that, her law enforcement officers did not leave the station. There were crimes committed, including rape and murder. And so I looked at this situation and how it was unfolding and got on social media, which is one of the great uses of social media, is activating, mobilizing people to stand up against stuff like this, and basically said, look, I have profound leadership experience. Like, I'm not going to say I don't. I do. Ever since I was a 17-year-old private in the Army and got identified to lead a squad, to being a sergeant major, to, being a team leader in the CIA. So it's in me. I understand how to lead. So I said, if nobody's going to do it, I'll do it. And what I'll do is I'll start an organization. And the organization was American Contingency, and the reason I started it is because I realized people who leaned on institutions to outsource their security, like first responders, could not depend on the government, because now government in their local backyard was dictating whether or not law enforcement enforced laws. And that's scary. That's a precedent. I've never seen it.
That's semi-permissive to non-permissive.
Exactly. That's literally creating a non-permissive environment. And we did that. It was called CHAZ, was the name of the
in America.
In America.
A non-permissive environment in the United States of America.
They created a war zone. I mean, this rapper Chaz was handing out AR-15s. They were checking IDs. There was a guy that was murdered in it. Like, every one of those people should have went to prison. And they didn't. None of them did. And it was like a social experiment gone wrong, right? Because we were like, we have to give them the space. Like, what? They're breaking the laws and burning our cities down. The black mayor of Atlanta, Georgia, and Killer Mike, the rapper, came out and told BLM and Antifa to stop, because 50% of the businesses in Atlanta are African-American owned. And it's like, what are we doing in this country? So I said, look, I'll do it. And a lot of people misconstrued that. They thought I was like activating to go to war. Like Sergeant Major Glover is going to take us to war. And I realized there was a lot of volatility in our populace of people who were disaffected for one reason or the other, that really were frustrated and angry. And I get it. I have no interest in going to war with anybody. I mean, when people say we're going to have a civil war, like, you're going to go to war with the politicians, like the 80, 90-year-olds, incoherent politicians? Like, it doesn't make sense. And I know war. I know I'm a very practiced and studied and well-versed person when it comes to war. And so I said, look, I want a group. I want to be able to mobilize. I want you to be able to do it on your own. So I developed this infrastructure that allows people to kind of look in their own backyard. Tucson right here, Phoenix on the road. The biggest American contingency groups are here in Arizona. And I'm proud of that. And people's first reaction is a visceral one. Oh, this is a militia. Ooh, it's really weird that those people are American citizens. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're construction workers. They're normal people with normal day jobs who get together and talk about what happens if there's a natural or man-made disaster, and what are we going to do about it when that happens. They developed a ham radio American Contingency Network. So they have communications with one another. They have literally, in our backyard, in natural disasters, mobilized and helped victims of natural disasters. And so it's a positive thing. It's got a bad rap because when people assemble in any way, form, or fashion, people get intimidated, especially the government, whose incentive is disenfranchising and disempowering you so you could be hooked up to the umbilical cord that is the institution.
At what point were you? At what point did you find out that you were now a terrorist?
Well, I knew from a business standpoint that something had happened. I had lost my Shopify account. Shopify gave me 48 hours and said your account's disabled, and I was like, "What? Like I haven't never done anything." And I was like, maybe it's the self-defense courses that I put online. Had no understanding, no reason, no explanation. And then all my accounts started getting shut down. Facebook got shut down. Instagram got shut down. And I'm like, what is going on? And so I always speculated. And then fast forward 2 years, and Project Veritas leaked a document from the FBI that had my name on it. And not only my name, but American Contingency.
What year was that?
Last year.
Okay. So I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast yet. So I started this podcast a year ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And had a couple of, I've been very fortunate to have, very, very cool guests come on the show, like yourself. And it was right after I'd done the show with Pat McNamara.
Mm-hmm.
So I was getting out of the Army. I'd done the SFL TAP program and all that. And I was going back to sign out, ETS, done. And I didn't get called in, but my buddy was in, one of the company meetings. They do their thing every morning. Hey, what do we got today? And I came up, and my buddy, obviously was looking out for me, but he's like, dude, you need to get a burner phone right now because you got the FBI investigating you for your podcast, and they're not going to let you out of the Army until the investigation's over. And so I've had this podcast for 3 months, maybe. I'd done 12 episodes. And, as a service member, I was very conscious of what I was saying and what was being put out. And there was nothing crazy. I think the craziest thing we talked about was, Carrie Lake
Mm-hmm.
and who owns the different news networks, and it's all BlackRock, Vanguard.
Of course. Yeah.
That episode got taken down off of YouTube in like 5 minutes. And so, I found out from my battalion that I was on the same list of domestic terrorisms and violent extremists over the Fear Not Do Right podcast, giving people practical kinetic solutions to complex social and political issues in order to enable a more autonomous and independent American people.
That's extremism.
That's the extremist extremism.
You're so far right. Look, I think that's this dude, Vivek Ramaswamy, talked about it on Sean Ryan's podcast. He talked about the deep state. And I grew up in the deep state. And I know what it is. It's exactly how he describes it. It's not one person. It's not one group of people. It's the culture. And the FBI has a very toxic culture when it comes to identifying its own as the potential enemy of the state. They did it with Ruby Ridge. They did it with Waco. And they did it with me. They've done it with you. They've done it with many American citizens. They did it with teachers at PTA conferences. And when you see this type of response, it tells you as an indication that the institution is corrupt. It's gone off the rails. And I'm not afraid to say that out loud. I mean, the FBI, according to my buddy that I talked to last weekend, is very interested in me. And it doesn't scare me. I mean, it doesn't scare me at all because I don't break laws. I've been a law-abiding citizen that's held a top secret clearance my entire life. I mean, I have probably still a dormant TSSCI. And when I look at this type of response, even people internally at the FBI that I hear about talking about me, I realize we have a very serious government problem of focusing down on in instead of focusing out and up. where the problems lie. If you're looking at me, you're not looking at the terrorist that's potentially infiltrating this country. I am a patriot of this country. I've sacrificed many years of my life, my entire 20s. I lost many friends. My son is named after two of my friends that were killed. So when I line out the goals and objectives for myself, that goes against a lot of what the institution wants to take back, because I'm literally stealing their thunder. And they can't succeed unless they have you, me, Americans bought into the dependence on the institution. So I advocate for cutting the umbilical cord. I don't advocate for going to war. I know what war is. Trust me, nobody wants to go to war. Nobody wants to go to war with me or my peer group. And I think that's lost on a lot of people. Like, I didn't grow up in the greatest generation. I didn't grow up in Vietnam. I didn't grow up in Korea. I grew up in the GWAT, the combination of technology integrated onto the battlefield. And I could move an infrared laser behind an M4 faster than most. In fact, I probably shoot better at night because my 9 rotations were at night than most. And I only say that to outline that there's a big disparity between what briefs well and what executes well. What briefs well is we're living in a society where there's laws, the regulations, and we need to keep a tab on these things. Your dad gave me a story today talking about a federal agency that had a problem with one of his civilians in his country or in his county. And they had came in and they said, "Hey, we have a problem with this." And he said, "Why are you going after a guy that has this specific problem? You're creating a problem. Don't you have anybody else or anything else to do besides create a problem? You're going to turn a law-abiding citizen into a criminal overnight?" That's what happened with January 6th. I mean, when you proactively take 1,000 people and do all the work in targeting those 1,000 people, some people who never even entered the Capitol building, in a so-called air quotes insurrection. I know what an insurrection is. It wasn't January 6th. January 6th was a protest that turned into an infiltration of the Capitol building into trespassing. Some people got hurt. Some people even got killed. All the people I know that have gotten killed, because we've dispelled the rumor that there were police officers killed. None of them were killed. There were police officers who died from heart attacks, suicide, post the event. But there were certainly protesters, including a woman, a veteran, who was shot in the head. And the Capitol police officer that did that was celebrated as a hero. We are living in an upside-down world. And so you might hear this, and because you only have a little bit of the information, make the assumption that I'm extreme. I'm not extreme. I'm a patriot of this country. And even the word patriot, or the symbolism of the imagery of a flag, is going, in the algorithm, going to identify me as a potential risk to the national security of this country. And that's a massive problem. If I wanted to be a risk to the national security of this country, I have plenty of information in my head, experience, and capability to do that. But I would never do that because I love this country. I'm a family born of immigrants who came here, who did all the right things the right way. I graduated high school with my mom. My mom got her high school diploma with me because she was an American citizen when she married my father, and her entire family came over and got their citizenship. My grandma, who was in her 60s at the time, barely spoke English and got her citizenship. And we know how to do things the right way. So do I. And I'll tell you what's not right. Our government isn't right. And there's a whole reason that is a problem.
So earlier we were talking about the essence of Fieldcraft in these physical, semi-permissive environments and natural disasters and catastrophes. It seems a lot more prevalent now, and increasingly, it's an increasingly worse problem with political, semi-permissive and non-permissive environments. What are you doing to navigate yourself and survive the ideological and political permissive-ness that you're experiencing as now, being identified and targeted by the FBI. And if I'm not mistaken, Chase Bank kind of canceled you guys, didn't they?
Yeah, our merchant service account canceled us. I mean, look, guys, if you're a conservative in this country, I'm not white. I don't consider myself white. If you're white, you're screwed, and you have a lot of adaptation and evolving to get through. That's what I did. I adapted and I overcame. And every incident I learned from. But I'm trying my hardest to stay focused, stay positive, and continue to shoot, move, and communicate. I mean, if I don't, then I'll just quit, and then I'll just like fade away. But I don't want to. I mean, there's a lot of buy-in, investment, and my return on investment is telling people the truth and educating people like I've been doing my entire life. And that's important to me. So, yeah, I'm going to get suppressed. I'm going to get canceled. I don't care. I just continue to evolve. I mean, every single thing the government or people have thrown at us, we've survived. I mean, we go through controversies where I'm like, this is a controversy? Like, really? And my team sweats it. They're like, oh, my God, this is a controversy. I'm like, that's not a controversy. I mean, nothing illegal, nothing immoral, nothing unethical. Continue to move on. And we put our head down and we move forward. We don't put our head in the sand. We put our head down and we move one step at a time forward. And we're still here. I mean, I know a lot of businesses. I know a lot of people. I know a lot of influencers, in air quotes, that have been around me and around all the things that have been going on, and they haven't survived. We will survive because we have no other choice. And we're a preparedness company. Like, if we don't survive, then what's the point of having a preparedness company?
As people, I mean, everyone's kind of freaking out about one thing or another, whether it's, just the absolute clown world. It's just straight buffoonery between the current administration and the shenanigans that they're trying to pull every single day, not just internally, but actively against American citizens. What is something that the average American can do? The average American contingency member can do to positively affect their circumstances when it comes to either their representation or how they can handle themselves in the face of the administrative problems that we're experiencing.
Yeah, I love when guys tell me all their opinions on world politics and all the things going outside the world, which they literally get from talking points, typically from national media, which is very altered and very much so propaganda. And they can't tell me why they're overweight. They can't tell me why they have no preparedness plans in place, why they're not good fathers or spouses, why they don't even have a job. So the start point is realizing there's variations in targets that you could affect. The 5 meter, the 25 meter, and the 100 meter target you can affect out the gate, day one. You're worried about the 1,500 meter target. And that's a problem because you can't affect that. You don't have the skill sets. So a lot of people have asked me a similar question, and, how do we take up arms and go and do the thing? I'm like, you don't. What you do is within your sphere of influence, you handle, protect, and love what you cherish most, your family, yourselves. So the focus should be on preparing yourself, your health and wellness, physical fitness, resilience, and your technical skill sets, and evolving that through your family. You're better off spending time with your children and teaching them resilience by taking them camping than you are involving yourself with worldviews and opinions that you know nothing about. All of it's skewed anyway. If things hit the fan, which they're bound to hit the fan, what does that mean? Well, the greatest gift our founding fathers gave us is the decentralization of government. And we live in states, United States, but states nonetheless. And we had a campaign in the 1860s called the Civil War that showed us how the separation of states and federal powers could divide us and bring us together. And so what you're bound to see in a worst-case scenario is the decentralization of powers. And if you live in a state like California, which I love California. I train there. This weekend. I'll be in California. I was born in Fort Ord, California. I started Fieldcraft Survival in a small town called Ione, California. I'm very fond of California. But because of the corrupt governor, Gavin Newsom, and the politicians, including the district attorneys and federal attorneys that continued to abuse their powers and destroy the beautiful state of California, that is going to be a state that falls. If you live in a state like Utah, which I am very fond of and I am a resident of, I will go out of my way to lock down the borders of Utah and protect the community of Utah, the Utahns. And I will align myself with people in other states that would do the same. And then what you'll see is a separation of ideologies. And I imagine there will be takeovers, but by the state. And that's not a good sign. That's not a good look because it'll be very tribal, but it might be good for the country. I don't want to see the country burn. If you see burning, there'll be like the civil unrest that we experienced with the protest. They'll be in heavy, densely populated areas and metropolitan areas. Because like Jason Aldean said, you don't want to try what they're trying in cities and small towns. Rural towns have the most capable human beings that are just waiting for that to happen. You don't want to test that. And so you will see those pockets and those populations of those families and those communities coming together and securing what they love most, which is their communities and families. And that's what you should be doing. You should be preparing for that. Homesteading, resilience, raising your babies, being good people, and then building community assets with people that are in your own community.
And it doesn't have to take until the bad thing happens to do that. We that's something that everyone needs to be doing right now.
Well, the good point in that is the fact that you are prepared that way builds resilience in all catastrophes, including natural disasters. I mean, whether it's Lahaina or the Camp Fire, whatever it is that's bound to happen, if you're affected by, breakdown in infrastructure and population and crime and whatever, it could be an incident in your own town. Because of those parameters that you build and being better prepared, it's going to help you. It's going to serve you well.
And I mean, like you said earlier, it's like it starts with that tribe. It starts with yourself. It starts with your family. Then it extends to that tribe. And when you can build that with other people, and it's so cool to see. And a lot of it has come from Fieldcraft and a lot of the content that you guys have done. But seeing this new wave of homesteading, and a couple of they're probably one of your neighbors at the ballerina farm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She's got
I get all my meat from them.
Yeah, she's got an awesome operation up there, and her sourdough is amazing.
Yeah, they're great people. I think that's the greatest thing about all this is it's just really fun, and it brings your family closer together. Look, if you're a single person, or you're a person who might even have grown up without a family, that's the greatest benefit in all this is you have the ability and control to start your own family unit and make the family that you always aspired or inspired to have. And that's important to distinguish because many men think not having a family, being single, doing whatever that is, running the streets or living my single life. Women say that on memes and stuff. It's like, it's not time to settle down. The best thing you could do is settle down. Because when you settle down, you build a natural autonomy in a very dynamic, capable, and strong family unit that is going to breed children that are going to be good people for this world, which is what we need. I mean, if the question was, what can we do? make babies and grow those babies into great human beings, right? Create a fire team with a family, and then evolve, make memories, build infrastructure, build business, do all the things that the founding fathers gave us in the Constitution with those liberties and that law and order, that left and right limit, and blow up your own family legacy, or build it from scratch.
It's definitely not easy.
Not easy.
Well,
it's hard to being single. I know that.
Well, it takes a lot of redirection too, where like I'm, myself, I'm 26. I just got married in March. We have a 2-year-old.
Congrats.
I have a 2-year-old stepdaughter, and it's a tremendous adjustment going from, team leader, squad leader, roughing up privates and doing, flanking and spanking and setting up ambushes and, spending every night freezing your butt off under nods, like dramatically different and almost in a way dramatically harder to bridle yourself and be able to steer yourself in the right direction and take care of a family and take care of a fire team in a much more gentle way, but in a much more serious and deliberate way as well.
Yeah, it's I always tell my guys, you got to understand your operational environment. If my guys came to me and they said, "Look, we can't work with this guy," I'm like, "What do you mean?" Like, he's just a pain in the ass. I can't work with this guy. And I'm like, "You're Green Beret. Your job is to build rapport. You're a force multiplier. Are you telling me you have 3 years of training, you have all this capability, and you can't build rapport with one human being? I don't care if you manipulate that human being. I don't care if you stretch your moral and ethical compass, because that's what it takes to get the mission accomplished. We have to realize that life is just a segue of different operational environments. You're the same person with a lot of capability. You just need to adapt. A lot of people find excuse because, and to be honest, being in the military is the easiest job you could ever have. It's easy because you're living a conventional life. Like, I love guys who are Green Berets, especially because it's unconventional warfare, irregular warfare, where they think they're living unconventionally. Even tier 1 organizations think they're not conventional. You're the most conventional. You're not conventional in the tactics. You're conventional in the routine, your discipline. It's a myriad of conventional disciplines that make you great. So when you remove that and you're a singleton, in special operations, you're a singleton. If you put on a shemagh and wore man jams, it's like, oh, you're doing low-vis operations. You're a singleton. That's easy. Becoming a civilian is the hardest thing, because now the responsibility and the onus is all on you. You create your own timeline. You create your own task organization chart. You do all these things. You're the commander and the ground force commander, right? You have strategic and tactical responsibility. But that's the challenge in it. I was intimidated when I became a civilian, and then I realized it's just an operational environment, and you have to adapt. You have to level up. You have to step up. And being a dad, for example, of twins, I have twins. That was the most difficult thing, but also the most purposeful thing I've ever done in my life. And I would so much rather raise my babies and build the memories than do anything else that I've done operationally. I mean, I got that out of my system. This is just a new kind of battlefield for me. If you were using military analogies, it's just a different campaign. And not every campaign is going to be quick and easy. Sometimes it's going to be a long haul. That's just how it is.
I think if you can grasp that mindset, it makes it so easy once you do. Once you see, like, okay, this is kind of the situation here, and this is my competition, or this is the target, is, conducting X, Y, Z business or family or whatever. and you see who you're up against, oh my gosh, it gets so. If you have an inkling of discipline and fire in you, and drive or savagery or whatever you want to call it, you're going to crush everybody if you can. But it takes identifying those principles, getting that, as you said, that task org and those principles, those disciplines in place, and then being able to execute on it.
Yeah, I've done podcasts with babies attached to me. I've done board of director meets with my kids in the room. Like now my kids are fully integrated in my business. I mean, I just did a Overland Expo show with my kids and did business meets with my kids sitting next to me. And the greatest thing about the luxury of owning and running your own business is you're your own boss. And I've developed and earned a position in my own business where I do what I want, but I'm still implementing the tactics that the Army taught me, which is making me more capable as a CEO. I go longer, I go harder, I go faster than all my employees because I expect that of me. I will burn these guys to the ground because I won't let them outwork me. And they'll see that work ethic and it will inspire them and they won't make excuses and they'll become better because of it. So, you know, as a man, as a father, as a spouse, as a entrepreneur, whatever you are, whatever role and responsibility, you have the ability in your own control, in your own habits, routines, to set that example for others to follow. And it's not just a mantra in the Ranger handbook. It's something that you could live by. You don't have to be a Ranger School graduate to do that, to implement that. You just have to be willing to have personal courage. And I would weigh personal courage more than discipline, because personal courage will get you off your ass. Discipline won't. Discipline's all the things that you do once you're off your ass. Personal courage is having the ability to personally allow yourself to be vulnerable to different situations and to fail. You know, if you have the personal courage to start a family, man, that's a good step in the right direction. Yeah, you'll fail, certainly. Have the expectation, manage it properly that you will fail, but man, have the personal courage to try. Most people never try, you know, and what we learn about ourselves when we try and we fail is very much more impactful than trying and succeeding and everything being rosy and perfect. The greatest lessons I've ever learned in life have been through profound failures. Admittingly, I don't like that. It sucks. But the romanticism and the tragedy that is life is, that's how it works. And so it's a beautiful ride. It's going to suck. There's going to be lulls and highs, but how can you expect to appreciate the high if you haven't had the lulls?
Right. So is there anything coming down the pipe with Fieldcraft or American Contingency or Mike Forrest podcast that's got you excited right now?
Yeah, we just filmed it. I mean, I filmed it with your old man. I mean, I'm taking prep life on the road. I'm tired of being in the studio. I adapted a budget to talking about social issues, getting in the field. A couple of the things that I want to tell Americans about the truth is on my YouTube channel, Mike Glover Actual, Fieldcraft Survival, you see it all over there, is what's going on the border. There's things that your dad are dealing with, that sheriffs and border counties are dealing with, that Americans are dealing with, that isn't reported. I want to go to South Korea and talk about that whole entire campaign and how volatile it is. I want to go to Lahaina once they start rebuilding. I don't want to interfere with what's going on right now. It's not my place, but I'd like to help them in some way, especially with the rebuilding process. I want to get out of the studio and get in the field and tell the truth. And that's really impactful and very different than what we've done before. The app is live. I have a Fieldcraft Survival app. It's on every app platform, Samsung, Roku, Amazon, Apple TV, all the things. You could tether it to your TV and all the education that we teach at Fieldcraft Survival. I'm not the subject matter expert, but I'm a good conduit for bringing experts to bear. So Kevin Estella, Amber, Mike Hernandez, all these people who are Doc Jones, all these people who are the resident expert in the field that's going to technically make you an expert is available in the app. And lastly, my book. I mean, it's a national bestseller, and it encourages me that people are reading it, and that it's got good reviews and good feedback, and has hit a lot of Wall Street Journal best-selling lists and nonfiction, because it means that people are paying more attention to preparedness. And when I started this company, the stigma I was fighting was this prepper tinfoil hat stigma. And I wanted people to go, that dude's not so crazy. I'm crazy, but I'm not so crazy. And this idea in preparedness isn't lost on me, and maybe I should pay attention. And so I think that book has bridged that gap and helped people. So it's called Prepared, a Manual for Surviving Worst Case Scenarios, available everywhere books are found. I'm pretty proud of that. And, last but not least, raising my babies, raising my kids. I am homeschooling my kids. I'm starting a homeschool program that's going to be integrated into Fieldcraft headquarters at Provo, Utah. I got 19,000 square foot jiu-jitsu studio, simunition, CQB shoot house, a gym, functional fitness gym, retail section, all the things.
The wholesome school shooting.
Yeah. Yeah. I literally, if I could never have my children step foot in a school, that's the way it's going to be. And so I'll figure out a way to train, assist, and advise my kids, because I want them to be successful, and I'm going to invest. I mean, my life is invested in my children more than anything else in the world. Business is fun. All these things are fun, but my kids come first.
Where can people find you, Mike?
FieldcraftSurvival.com, Mike Glover Actual, Mike.a.glover. My backup's Mike Glover Actual on Instagram. And my Patreon is Mike Glover. You can find me at Mike Glover.
Awesome. Mike, this has been amazing. I want to thank you for coming on the show. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff here. If you wanna go support anything that Fieldcraft Survival's doing, anything that Mike Glover's got his hands in, which is pretty much everything.
Yeah, that's a lot.
You guys know where to go. If you want to support the podcast, go to fearnotdoright.com. We got lots of new merch. We got some cool kicks, and we got more stuff coming your way in content and stuff. Mike, one last time, thank you very much. This has been a treat, and this has been the Fear Not Do Right podcast.